Welcome back to the CyberVault. We are here for episode 12. Absolutely thrilled to have Chris Pogue here with us today. Chris is the Director of Digital Forensics and Incident Response at CyberCX and is also a Professor of Practice at Oklahoma State University. Chris, great to have you on, and why don't you give us a quick intro to yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie, and thank you for having me. I think your intro was pretty good. I'm the Director of Digital Forensics and Incident Response for CyberCX. We are headquartered in Sydney, Australia, but we have offices in the UK and the United States. I've been in the cybersecurity space for 30 years. I think longer than many of our listeners have been alive. Um, Started off in the United States Army. I was a warrant officer in the Signal Corps, attached to the Criminal Investigation Division during the early stages of when cyber wasn't even called cyber; it was called information security back in the mid 1990s. So subsequent to my service in the U.S. Army, I worked at IBM. So I was there for 11 years inside their Global Services Division, both in the penetration testing and forensics teams. I am a much better investigator than I am pen tester, so I stuck with that. After my time there, I went to Trustwave Spider Labs, where I spent 6 years doing forensics as well as teaching in the law enforcement space, both locally, state, and federal agencies. Subsequent to that, became a chief information security officer at a software company in Australia called Nuix. Spent 9 years there, and I've been at CyberCX now for 2 years as the director of DFIR. And then during that time, as an instructor, both at Oklahoma State University and prior to that, Southern Utah University, teaching international business and forensics.
Awesome. Well, what a career you've had, and I suppose kind of you referenced it there, but cybersecurity being an evolving kind of landscape, you've really been able to witness some of that evolution. And I think what I'd love to kickstart with today is you kind of broke down a bit of the career that you've had, and it's definitely been an impressive career. And I think you kind of bring a great example of being able to build through and what a real kind of good trajectory can look like if you're dedicated to kind of the market. And I think kind of maybe it'd be good if you could tell us a little bit about maybe how you secured those roles, kind of what helped you get to the next, and kind of maybe just talk us through how you actually got to where you are today.
Sure. So the Army was was the easiest. I was in a combat role. And so down in the motor pool where all the vehicles are that we have to, pull maintenance on, it's called PMCS, or Preventative Maintenance Checks and Services. It's bloody hot in Oklahoma in the middle of the summertime. And so when we were offered to take an exam to test our aptitude with computer science, I didn't want to be in the motor pool where it was bloody hot. And so I said, sure, I'll take the test. And it's at the time, I think I was 23 years old, 22 years old. I did really well on the test. So it turns out I'm wired for this kind of work. And so the Army said, hey, you're perfect for this sort of stuff. Why don't we take you out of the motor pool permanently and put you in a technical role? And so then once I got off active duty, I served in the reserves, right? So I did that for a number of years, but that's when I began my technical journey, actually at American Express Technologies, who then were subsequently taken over by IBM Global Services. And so like the Borg from Star Trek, we were assimilated and then became full-blown IBMers. But I really got interested in security because operations it's a solved problem. Right. Understanding how systems work. Yeah, there's evolutions in technologies and protocols and things like that. They change over time. But to me, the challenge wasn't figuring out how it works. The challenge was figuring out A, how to break it, and B, how to catch other people that broke it. And so I really got interested in the early days of forensics and pen testing, most of which we didn't have tools for. Like there's heaps now of software companies that provide penetration testing capabilities and forensics capabilities. Well, back in the mid 90s, we were writing it right in Perl or in Python or in these and languages like that. And so we had to solve the problems without necessarily the technical tools to execute those solutions. And so we got good with kind of making things work. And so as you fast forward through, your career, technology changes, right? I remember running investigations on 5.25-inch floppy disks. I mean, that's how long ago we're talking. And I would imagine most of our listeners don't even know what those are, or they've seen them in a museum somewhere. So the evolution of technology then became something you just had to get comfortable with. And so while the technology might change and advances through time, the underlying principles, how you run an investigation, how you document what you're doing, how you present that to non-technical audience members, like that doesn't change. That's been the same for literally hundreds and hundreds of years. And so once you learn those foundational components, right, stacking the technology on that is a bit less complex than you might think.
No, for sure. And I think kind of one thing that you you touched base on there is kind of the that evolution piece, how much kind of changing, and I think being able to stay with the trends and kind of the changes that are happening are
Mm.
ultimately critical for allowing you to still progress in your career and secure kind of new opportunities. And I think kind of let's dive a little bit deeper into that. And obviously cybersecurity it's a huge, huge vertical, right? There's so many different things that you can go into, and I often think there's a little bit of a misconception that you need to be a coder. You need to be good at kind of development or just one specific thing to work in cyber, and as you just demonstrated there, actually, kind of you were really good at that kind of investigation side, and that's kind of there's a lot of like analytical skills and stuff that have to go into that, and I think
Mhm.
if we kind of maybe talk about what skills may be needed in cyber right now, what are you potentially seeing? And for anybody that's really looking to get into this vertical, what would you maybe advise them to really focus on?
Mhm. That's a great question, and I talk to my students, frequently about this. And so there's saying you want to get into cybersecurity is a bit like saying you want to live in North America. Like it's a really big place, and there's mountains, and there's plains, and there's swamps, and there's cities, and there's hot temperatures and cold temperatures, and there's progressive and there's conservative. Like there's so many things that fall under that umbrella of cybersecurity. And to your point, something like writing code. I am not a developer, right? I could write in Perl, but I don't think anyone writes in Perl anymore, right? I think Ruby and Python and other high level languages have taken that over, but I don't code and I haven't for years. So that is a skill that you can use within that big umbrella of cybersecurity, but it's certainly not the only skill. So there's a number of positions that when I talk to my own students about this specific question, we say, well, where do you want to live, right? And then where do you have the capabilities of living, right? So some people want to be penetration testers. They love the idea of breaking things for a living, but those are typically people who don't think outside the box. They burn the box and stomp on the ashes. Like they are properly just wired differently. And so the things they can do and the way they think about how to attack, networks and applications and mobile apps and that sort of stuff, it's a different thought process. And so if you don't possess that alternative thinking process, right, you're going to struggle as a pen tester. And the same way in forensics, right? When in my passion is the hunt. Like I love chasing after bad guys through cyberspace, and that requires another specific skill set, very detail oriented. You have to take heaps of notes because you have to anticipate either prosecution or litigation. So this may end up in courts, and then you're going to have lawyers and opposing experts that are going to try to poke holes in everything you do. So you have to be really detail oriented. Right? We call this the chihuahua on the pork chop. Like you have to be relentless in your pursuit of what happened. You take nothing at face value and you're constantly digging and digging and digging, balanced with the understanding of when have you gone too far, right? When is digging not necessary anymore? When does it not support the investigation, right? So there's a bit of nuance there. But then there's whole other swaths of opportunities within cybersecurity that have nothing to do with either of those. There's compliance, right? Understanding things like GDPR or SOC compliance, the Australian Essential 8, California SEPA laws, like really understand what boxes do you need to tick so that your organization can be compliant with legislation and GRC regimes. There's law, right? There are now attorneys and law firms that specialize in cyber law and cybersecurity breach defense. And so that's an opportunity. There's electronic discovery or e-discovery, which supports the court systems. Most evidence now, not all of it, but most of it has either, it's either all digital or it has a very heavy digital element. So being able to support attorneys and prosecutors in the execution of their positions could be, something you're interested in. And then there's strategy, there's risk, there's cloud, there's this whole field of opportunities. So I would say figure out what you like, right? Look at all of the different, potential roles within that cybersecurity umbrella, pick the ones you like, and then, filter the other ones out and then go, do I have the aptitude to do these, right? Take a real honest, Ernest Shackleton type assessment, right? The reason he didn't lose anyone is because he took a really hard, honest look at the job. It's going to suck. You're going to be cold. You're probably going to be hungry most of the time. But if you succeed, wealth and riches and fame forever. It's that sort of thing. It is, here is what my skills are, and here is where my interests lie. And if you can get those to align, well, then you're going to be in a really strong position.
Yeah, for sure. And I think so many people kind of view cyber as, oh, it's like the cool kid on the block. It's there's terminology thrown out left, right, and center that makes it sound really cool. It's well known that it's pretty well paid industry, and it's also more often than not offers a relatively remote or at least kind of a remote aspect of a role, and actually can offer quite a bit of travel for people that want to do that as well. So it's got all these tick boxes that make it seem really lucrative. And I think it's really easy to forget that it's a very hard job. You're dealing with criminals on the daily, and half the time they've got better tech than you do because they're ahead of us. So it's a constant chasing your tail, and it's a high pressure role most of the time. And I
Yeah,
think
it's definitely not Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I mean, it's holidays, it's weekends, it's anniversaries, it's graduations. Like I've missed all of those things at one point or another. And as you said, it's really high risk. I mean, I view what we do in cybersecurity as almost a public service,
yeah,
like an ambulance drivers or paramedics. When someone's business is at risk, we are the first people they look to. And in incident response, in some cases, we're the first people they call. So
yeah,
like we are the 911 of the cyber world. And we take that role very seriously. And so if the phone rings at 2 a.m., guess what? You are up at 2 a.m. And if that's not what you want, that's fine. There's lots of jobs inside of, that cybersecurity umbrella that don't have that level of urgency.
yeah.
But if that is what you like and that gets your motor running, then this may be, a good career field to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's another thing to kind of consider because of all those things we've just mentioned there. It makes cyber quite a competitive space to get into. However, I think one of the biggest challenges that it's faced is despite the amount of unfulfilled roles that there are within the world of cyber, most people want experience. It's quite difficult if you're in a situation like that and you're getting that phone call at 2 a.m. to have somebody who doesn't really understand the practicalities of that role, and you've suddenly got this really urgent thing on your desk, but you kind of need to teach someone at the same time. It can be taxing, and I think that's kind of where there's a big gap in the market. But I think what would be really valuable, and obviously you deal with kind of your students as well, and you're obviously a hiring manager. You've been through some of this yourself. What can people do to differentiate themselves and set them up for more success when they're really trying to, they've identified what they want to do in the field. What's the next step? How do they make
Yeah.
sure they can get that job?
Yeah, it's so technical acumen will not be the thing that sets you apart. So just kind of get that in your head right now. It's a little bit like being, a professional football player. Like everybody's fast. Everybody knows how to dribble and pass and shoot. Like those are not the things that are going to get you, a are going to get you that next job, right? So it's what are the other skills, right? If you imagine in some of these cybersecurity roles, like when we post investigator roles, like we'll get hundreds of applicants, and everyone has a tech degree from some university or another. And this global talent war that we're facing, I tell my students here in Oklahoma, I work in Sydney, Australia, right? So there's students from the UK, there's students from India, there's students from Japan, there's students from China, there's students from, all over the United States and Germany and Switzerland and Mexico. Like that's who you're competing against. And as you said early on, Katie, a lot of these roles are remote. And so people aren't looking for the most geographically convenient, they're looking for the best and the brightest. And if the best and the brightest are in Germany and in Tulsa and in, Sydney, then that's just what you do, right? So having that technical capability or having a technical degree is a must, but it's a ticket to the dance. It doesn't get you a dance partner. So those skills that are going to differentiate you, right? First and foremost, communication. You have got to be able to articulate what you're doing, why you're doing it, what it means, why it's pertinent, right? All that sort of stuff, both verbally and in writing, to a non-technical audience, which requires a bit of translation skills, because all of the people that I deal with, whether it's judges or juries, I'm an expert witness in the U.S., so I frequently have to give, legal testimony inside of courtrooms or write depositions, all non-technical audience members, your executive team, many chief information security officers, boards of directors, attorneys, non-technical. So you have to take these really complex technical terms that you take such pride in being, a practitioner of, and translate them effectively to someone like your grandma who knows 2/3 of nothing about what you're talking about. So number one, communication. I think the second thing then that becomes super important is what I sort of, I joked about earlier, but the Chihuahua and the pork chop, right? This unrelenting attack on what do I need to learn? How do I get better? I found something. Identification does not equal investigation, right? It means you found something that requires additional investigation. So really running things to ground, relentlessly, and having that, that innate desire to want to make sure that you have, found the answer, right? And that is not common. Like we struggle sometimes with, some of our employees and students who just they think good enough is good enough, and it's just not, right? And then there's the, what I call sort of the easy things of being on time, being dressed appropriately, having a good attitude. I just was talking to my students about this last week. I looked up quotes from, Larry Ellison, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and all of them agreed a ridiculous amount, a ridiculous amount of your success early in your career has nothing to do with your technical capability or what school you went to, but is almost exclusively attached to your attitude.
Yeah.
Do you have a can do, let's get it done, you got it attitude? Or do you complain and you whine and I don't want to do this and this is late at night or this is early in the morning or I don't want to travel? Like for a hiring manager, I don't have time for that, right? And I've got 99 other people waiting in line out the door for your job. So if you really want to set yourself apart, be the first one there, the last one gone, do the jobs that nobody wants to do better than anyone has ever done them, run things to ground, educate yourself about emerging technologies, and learn how to be a good communicator that is worth its weight in gold if you can do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the biggest things that, as someone who recruits for these roles, it doesn't matter whether you're junior or experienced. That is arguably one of the most valuable skill sets to have within the industry. And it is often the biggest bit of feedback of their technical acumen out of this world. But they're not a great communicator. We couldn't engage with them enough. We couldn't really dive into the intricate details. So if you're a coder and you don't have any people facing responsibilities, that's great. But it also limits your progression if you want to become a leader or anything like that. So 100% great skill to try and focus on as well. And I think this kind of naturally takes us into the fact that a lot of people, although it doesn't have to be the only route, and I think cyber's starting to open up into the world of apprenticeships and stuff like that now, but university is naturally the stepping stone that people have gone into. And especially if people are doing a cybersecurity degree or a master's, we've already touched base on the fact
Mhm.
that, well, so is all your competition.
Mhm.
And that doesn't necessarily teach you the real life applications of a role in cyber. And I think a pen tester, for example, is a great example. You might practice penetration testing in your degree, but you're practicing the actual test, not the 4 days of reporting that you've got to put together to prepare to then present back. You're just going to
Right.
do the fun bit. So
Right.
I suppose kind of what can people do to, in addition to some of those things that we've just discussed to help differentiate themselves, what are some key skills that aren't maybe being taught in university that people should probably take a bit of a focus on and spend some time kind of looking into or again refining?
Yeah. Uh, so writing and reporting, right? I lament the fact that many of my students are just bad writers. And I, I even had one student try to submit a forensics report written to me on his phone, like a text message with no punctuation and no capitalization. Like, so understanding that there's one, sorts of writing style and the type of language using kind of pedestrian language, colloquialisms, things like that, that you use for your friends. And there's a completely different language that you have to use in the professional setting. So knowing how to be clear, knowing how to be concise, knowing how to not bury the lead, and writing in a manner that's devoid of colloquialisms, that uses appropriate language, like that is again worth its weight in gold. And it's arguably one of the hardest things. Like I've been working with investigators for, as a leader for 20 years, and that is very difficult. And for whatever reason, people have this sort of, existential attachment to their writing, like writing and driving. Like if you criticize either one, people just they go mental. So just having this understanding that you have a coach or you have a mentor the same way you would in sports. They don't hate you, they don't think you're stupid. They want you to be your best, right? And I tell my students and I tell my investigators that work for me, I care about you too much to let you be average. And so learn how to write and find a mentor that is going to beat you about the head until you become a good, clean, clear, concise author, right? So number one skill, super important, learn how to write. And then I think, back to communication, right? We talked about that. I think the last one that I teach, right? But because I write the curriculum, so I have control over it, is I teach human interaction. I teach reading cues, reading body language, being intentional about the language that you use, being intentional about the nonverbal signals that you're sending. Because, most people don't know that the words that we use only represent 7% of communication. Seven, right? That means 93% of the communication that we're engaging in has nothing to do with words we're using. It's pitch, it's intonation, it's facial expressions, it's clothing, it's body positioning, it's the pen that we're holding, the bag that we're carrying, right? All of those things are part of that communication process. And if you don't know that, you are either A, sending signals that you don't want to send, or B, receiving signals that you have no idea how to interpret, right? And so really starting to dig into, well, if I'm going to send a signal anyway, whether I, like it or not, get good at being clear about what signals you're sending and be intentional about the signals that you're sending. And then understand how body language works, understand things like anchor points and micro expressions and, pauses and breathing patterns. Like you can read books on this stuff. It's not GCHQ, sort of secret squirrel stuff. There's heaps of books and I'm happy to provide examples afterwards, but, really getting a good at that. And then go to the pubs and watch people. I tell my students all the time, go to the bars this weekend and watch. And just, or like watch a television show. Friends is a great TV show for this. Turn the volume down and watch the body language. So I'd say those are my top three. Learn how to write, learn how to communicate, and learn how to read people, because all of those things will be something you eventually do on a daily basis, and you're going to be expected to do it to a high degree of expertise and professionalism.
Absolutely. And not just that as well, it's the way that it can help you be more successful. The doesn't matter what industry you're in or what job you're doing, you're dealing with people at the end of the day, whether that's internal in your business, whether you're dealing with people externally as part of your role, you are dealing with people, and ultimately a lot of the time your performance and your success are coming from how those people respond to you. It's like, I always talk about the power of networking and stuff like that, especially when you're in quite a tight space. But ultimately, that reputation can get you opportunities and stuff. But it's the same internally. If you're being recognized as somebody that could kind of collaborate well with many other individuals because you have those behaviors, naturally you're just going to be more successful. It's just that kind of correlation. And I suppose what would be a really powerful thing to close on, Chris, is you're obviously you've been an individual contributor. You've been in the shoes of people that are now kind of starting to build their career. But right now, you're a hiring manager yourself. You recruit onto your team. You've been doing that for several years. And I think what kind of could be a really good takeaway is obviously we've thrown loads of information out for individuals to kind of know, okay, here are some things that I can go away and improve on. But what would you say for yourself personally, you really look for when it comes to, right, I want this person on my team. This person, I'm coming off an interview and you're excited. You're like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is a hire I want to make.
Yep. So your ability to make a first impression, right, is 8 seconds. That's it. That's all you got. So you better plan the heck out of those 8 seconds, right? And so, like we talked about, being on time, being dressed appropriately, brush your bloody teeth. I have been in interviews where someone has stunk up the room with their nasty breath because they didn't take the, 10 minutes or whatever to make sure their teeth were brushed. All of those intangibles, right? Those communicate preparation, forethought, care, attention to detail, right? I'm picking up on all of those things because I can look at your resume beforehand and I can know, okay, Katie went to this university, she has this degree, these were her marks. Like I don't need you to read that for me. I'm reading everything else about you and I'm summing you up in 8 seconds. I'm going to ask you questions, I'm going to talk to you and stuff, but my initial impression, 8 seconds. So plan that 8 seconds ad infinitum. Like make sure every single detail from your, perfume or cologne that you're wearing to the pen that you're carrying to the, the type of moleskin that you're writing on, like plan it out. And then the second one is practice, practice, practice interviews. Nothing is more uncomfortable, Katie, and I'm sure you've seen it, where someone gets in an interview, they have no idea what they're going to say. They have no, thoughts prepared. They have no responses prepared. They have no questions prepared. They just sort of show up like a lump and think that their, degree is going to carry them through the interview. Like, meh. No, it doesn't work like that. So, anticipate what questions you're ask ChatGPT. I am going for an interview for this position. What sorts of questions should I be prepared for? And ChatGPT will spit it out for you. And there's no reason not to prepare. Everyone has friends and family and, mates or whatever. Have them prep you, have them, get you ready to answer questions, and then come with your own questions, right? It should be a two-way interview because every, organization that you work for, you have the ability to impact. And that's where you want to point your time and energy and effort, right? And some people want to work for sports teams. Some people want to work for really environmentally conscious organizations. Some people want to work for, ones that do good and serve the public, like I believe CyberCX does. I mean, think about what it is that I want to do and why I want to do it here. Right? There's a great book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. Figure out your why and align the places that you interview, and then have questions ready and say, I'm interested in this. Tell me about this aspect of your business or this aspect of the culture, and go in prepared for that. That will make more of an impact doing those 3 things than your resume. Right? I mean, your resume should be printed. You print it on thick paper. You have multiple copies, all that sort of basic stuff. But I don't get excited about resumes. I get excited about people, because to your point, Katie, we work with other humans until the robot uprising, which we're all eagerly awaiting. We got to work with people. And so that's what I'm interested in, because I'm thinking, is this person going to play nice with the other kids in the sandbox? Is
Yeah.
this person going to be someone I can count on? Is this person going to be someone that when the phone rings at 2 a.m., they're going to say, "You got it, boss, I'm at it"? Or are they going to give me a hard time and whine and complain? Or is this the kind of person that, hey, it's Q4, sorry, no leave. Everyone has to be dedicated to, sprinting to the finish line. Are they going to be cool with that? Or are they going to be annoyed that they can't take leave with their mates because it's Q4? Like
Yeah.
I'm summing up those things, not your resume. Right. I've read your resume by the time you got there. I don't need you to talk about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think some really powerful things to take away there, that sometimes when you've been there and done that, it feels obvious, but actually it's not. You don't know what you don't know kind of thing. And if you're not in those shoes, how are you supposed to know to kind of how to walk in them? So but Chris, it's been a real pleasure to have you on today. I think some really, really valuable takeaways. And yeah, thank you so much for your insight and your time today.
Yeah, and Katie, if you have listeners that want to contact me afterwards, I'm very happy to answer questions. They can email me at christopher.pogue@okstate.edu. That's my education, my university email. I'll answer emails from folks all day long. Happy to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, well, definitely make sure to reach out, and Chris will be more than happy to help. And I think, yeah, in this day and age of the competitive world of security, any help that people offer to give, I always recommend make sure to take it up. So, but yeah, Chris, real pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Katie. Appreciate it. And thank you to all your listeners.